Hello and welcome to the GTLA Lakers 818 podcast. It's Friday, January 4th. Welcome to the new year 2019. Haven't had a podcast in a minute, but I'm here today with a new guest host, my homie from law school, Chris. How's it going, man?
Appreciate it, man. First guest on your pod. I'm honored.
Yeah, man, this should be fun. I'm looking forward to getting your insights and having a little back and forth talk about these Lakers. So we just watched this Knicks game. Terrible loss for the Lakers. The Knicks were on an 8-game losing streak before we gave them the win tonight. Those last 5 minutes were very interesting, I thought, because, throughout the whole game, it's like, yeah, you see these good things Lakers are doing. Ingram has 21 points, Lonzo 17, Hart, 16, I think. But then once the game slowed down and we really got to crunch time, those last 5 minutes, and it was clear our leaders are Ingram and Lonzo, they failed to deliver there at the end. What did you see?
I mean, one play I want to look at with Lonzo, I want to say about 55 seconds left. If I'm an opposing coach, I'm cutting this film and using it as a scouting report against them. He's on the three-point line, gets chased off, is put in a mid-range situation where all the passing lanes are walled off, and he's got Kenner coming at him as the last line of defense to defend. And I knew as soon as that happened, bro, he's going to force a pass here. He's not comfortable taking this shot. Sure enough, fires it over to his right. Mario Hezonja's right there on that spy play to steal it from him. And that pretty much, I think, was the game right there.
Yeah, that pretty much sealed it. Alonzo also a couple minutes before, or maybe a minute before, on an inbounds play, inbounding a sideline, and we get a 5-second violation.
You still got a timeout in that situation. The worst case scenario, you got to call it there. But I mean, that their inability right now to execute when they're in the half court, when they're not getting up and down the floor, creating turnovers, I think that's the real deficiency and weakness with this team right now. And you see it particularly with the point guard, Lonzo, unfortunately. He just hasn't developed those skills to be able to score in some of these situations. I mean, that same play I'm talking about, you knew that the defense was playing him to make that pass, and he needed to take that shot. That's the play that was there, and he just didn't have it.
Yeah, and even earlier in that game, we saw Lonzo. And it's something Stu Lance always brings up, and we'll talk about Lonzo some more later, but just those layups, missing layups. But then let's talk about layups on the other side with Brandon Ingram. In the last 5 minutes, he had at least 3 drives, I want to say, where it just ended up either he got blocked or it went out of bounds or he missed. And I mean, it's nice a lot of times when it's extendo time, as Stu Lance says, but I don't know, because it wasn't just today. It was even the last 2 games before this. In the last 5 minutes, Ingram just pretty much crumbled, right at the end of those games.
Yeah, I mean, the Oklahoma game, I'm giving a bit of a mulligan because he's going up against Paul George, one of the best one-on-one defenders in the league. I think he just looked a little overmatched in that one. But tonight, against this Knicks team that really doesn't have that sort of ace defender, he's just got to find a way to finish those plays or at least draw the fouls and get to the line, and couldn't make that happen tonight.
Yeah, Ingram, game high, 21 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 5 turnovers. Pope, 19 points, 6 boards. McGee, 18 and 9. Lonzo, 17, 6 boards, 2 assists, 6 turnovers. Josh Hart, 2 for 11, 1 for 9 from 3. 6.7 boards. It's not going to get it done. Let's take a look at where the Lakers are right now and discuss what we're going to talk about on this podcast. It's been a minute since the last podcast. It's been a good 15 games since then. My bad about that. But now it's New Year's resolution, get the podcast going even more. But last time we talked, we were 15 and 9 and in 5th place. Since then, we've gone 6 and 9 and are now in 8th place, hanging on to that last playoff spot. We had victories against Memphis, Miami, Charlotte, New Orleans, Golden State, Sacramento, and losses to the Spurs, Rockets, Wizards, Brooklyn, Memphis, Sacramento, Clippers, OKC, and the Knicks tonight. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Definitely injuries. Injuries have been recently a huge theme for the Lakers. I mean, we've lost actually 4 of our last 5 games, but keep in mind, those are without LeBron James. Rondo's injured. McGee missed some time. Brandon Ingram missed some time. Yeah, so the first person I want to get into is I want to talk about Brandon Ingram. Get into this some more. It seems like, especially from my page, if you're not following, go on Instagram, follow at Laker Memes 818. It's starting to feel like the Laker fandom is starting to turn a little bit on Ingram. I mean, we've seen Kuzma just kind of like explode recently. He's playing like a baller. Without Ingram missed 7 games, and without him, we went 3-4. And he since he's come back from injury, he's averaging 18 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. Not really any steals, blocks, or threes. Shooting 47% from the field goal, and 60% from the free throw line, which is not good. But yeah, just tell me how you're feeling about Ingram this season and what you think about him.
I mean, real quick before I get to Ingram, with that Wizards game and John Wall, he dropped that 40 bomb. But that looked like an audition tape to me. I know you guys talked in the last pod about how, that's kind of an obscene amount of money you want to be paying him with the $40 million plus the trade kicker. But that looked to me like to get me out of here to Magic or Pelinka. But Ingram in general, you talk about the struggles that he's had, the kind of difficulties he's had meshing with the lineups that LeBron has. His numbers, Ingram, tend to be a lot better when he's off the floor as opposed to on it with LeBron. They tend to work better separately, and I think it's a bit of the struggle in terms of trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together and how Ingram's game fits with LeBron. I think that he's more of an on-ball type player. He likes to be able to create off of drives, and when you guys had mentioned the point on the last pod about and some other places I've seen it, trying to have either Hart or KCP in the starting lineup at the 2 as opposed to Ingram, because he works those two work a little more naturally in the offense. The primary sort of action that they tend to have off of their half-court sets is having either KCP or Hart in the corner come off of pin downs of screens and then catch and shoot. And Ingram, I don't know if it's because of the fact physically he's not built the same way as those guys, got a higher center of gravity, tends to get knocked off of his spot a little bit more. I feel like he tends to have more trouble meshing with those lineups. Maybe you want to see him more with the second unit, stagger his minutes so that he's not with LeBron as much. But those are kind of the general observations I see with him and him trying to find his way in his 3rd season.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to see him off the bench for the reasons you said. And yeah, just people like Kuzma and Hart and Casey who just tend to pop threes definitely just mesh with LeBron more. And as I've talked about before on different podcasts, like Ingram, he just doesn't like to shoot threes even. He's not like a catch and shoot 3 guy. But I want to ask you this. This is something I've been wondering, because how everyone today is talking about Ingram, like how he has to have the ball in his hands and how he's like this, just loves driving to the basket. Like when he came out of Duke, like I didn't feel like that was what his game was. Like do you recall or have a feeling on, is this today how people describe Ingram? Is that what you thought he was coming out of Duke?
I'd have to look at some of his Duke tape. I haven't watched it in a while. But
yeah.
I feel like I'd have to guess at Duke because I can't really remember any of the other guys on that team that were really handling the ball that much. And certainly in his first couple years with the Lakers, Luke Walton really tried to put him in situations where he was the primary ball handler, where they'd have him initiating the offense. I know a play that they tended to run a lot last year was a quick little give and go with him and Randall. Randall would kind of come out to the elbow or a little bit closer down, and then Ingram would, just throw the ball to him real quick, kind of feint one way, and then drive past the defender and get the ball back from Randall, and usually have a layup or a dunk. Maybe it's a situation where Luke kind of wants to find some designated or scripted plays where he can specifically find ways to get Ingram going in spots where he's comfortable. If he is going to have to be off the ball more, which tends to be the case when you have LeBron, Lonzo, and Rondo in the lineups at different points.
Yeah. All right. Well, the reason I bring up BI first on this pod is because, there's been a bunch of games since the last podcast, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but just kind of touch on some of the big ones that had big themes. And the first one I want to talk about is this Lakers-Pelicans game. And not so much the game itself, but just talking about LeBron and his comments before the game, after the game regarding Anthony Davis. LeBron says, "Oh yeah, I'd love to play with Anthony Davis." Everyone goes crazy. "Oh my God, he wants. We're gonna make trade and whatever."
Tamper on players.
Yeah, everyone's trying to get tampering violations on LeBron. And afterwards, LeBron made a quote about, "Oh, I'll play with anyone, KD, Kyrie, whoever, blah blah blah." Then they had dinner after. There's that clutch sports, baby.
Right.
And look, it seems clear to me like Ingram would be, if we were to make a trade for AD this season or whenever, like it seems like Ingram is prime for that trade. And there's one interesting wrinkle I thought that I heard about since the last podcast I want to bring up is about the fact that the Celtics right now cannot trade for Anthony Davis because of some weird rule regarding Kyrie Irving. And so the Lakers, they have a pretty interesting window here this season before the trade deadline to try to. We don't know. Anthony Davis obviously would have to demand a trade, but let's just say hypothetically, how are you feeling now about a trade potentially involving Ingram and some of the young cats?
Specifically one for Anthony Davis. That's a player you're talking about who's the first, second team All-NBA guy, perennial All-Star. I think if he's on the market, and I don't know that Dell Demps and the Pelicans organization have made it clear that he is. I think they've been pretty adamant that he hasn't, but when a player like that becomes available, or at least there's a possibility that he's available, you have to explore it. And I'd have to imagine that if New Orleans was going to try and swing that deal, Ingram would be an indispensable part of that trade. He'd have to be included. And, to depend on how much more they're asking for in that deal, if it's, Lonzo and Hart plus a pick, maybe that's enough to get it done. But at a certain stage, I feel like you do have to try and make the overtures to get that player if possible. The last thing I want to see is the Celtics, as you mentioned, with the Kyrie trade, they can't acquire a player like Davis until this offseason in 2019. And, as a Laker fan, if you're essentially trying to play keep away and keep the player of Anthony Davis's caliber from your biggest rival, that's something that I would definitely have to consider doing.
Yeah, and for you guys listening that might not know, the reason we bring up the Celtics is because they have a bevy of assets available. They have 4 first-round draft picks this year, and they have a lot of youngsters on that team that are, they have people sitting on their bench, Jaylen Brown, Rozier, Gordon Hayward, all these dudes are sitting on their bench because they're just that deep. They are definitely real players if whenever they would be available for an AD trade, and we definitely do not want to see that happening. Okay, let's move on to this Lakers-Warriors game because, this game was huge because this is a game that LeBron James got injured. and he's already missed 5 games now, and we're 1-4. And a report came out saying he's gonna miss at least the next 3 games. I think I read he has like a grade 2 growing sprain. And so it is interesting that we do get to see these Lakers without LeBron. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about these Lakers, man, without LeBron right now? Like,
it's been tough to watch. I think we're going through the games, 2 against Sacramento. One of them, the home game, was a win. The one on the road was one that you hate to see get away from them. Had a double-digit lead with less than 5 minutes to go on the road and end up losing it on that Bogdanovich fadeaway 3.
boo.
Yeah. I don't know if it's with all the big shots that the Lakers have hit against them, that Ori 3 back in the 2002 Western Conference Finals. Maybe we're even now.
Yeah.
So that I'll take that trade-off. But
Definitely.
I mean, look, they've clearly struggled without him. The Clippers, I think, they had a double-digit lead against them in the second half, managed to let that one get away from them. And those are, 3 really important in-division games against teams that are at or ahead of you in the standings. To drop those, very difficult to see. And, games that you feel like they should, and based on the way they played, could have won even without LeBron with his groin strain.
Yeah. And this game was interesting because, man, like, Rondo killed it this game against the Warriors. Like, he won the game pretty much. It was really him and Zubac, like, turned it up, and we crushed the Warriors. I remember when LeBron got hurt, we were up maybe like 10 or so, and then the Warriors cut it to 2. And then all of a sudden, Rondo just came in, and we were up 20, and we just sailed to a nice victory over those Warriors. And then it was fun seeing the Warriors lose last night to the Rockets. Yeah, so I mean, the whole story is starting to come together where it's like, man, like, it's something I've been feeling all season. It's like, I want to go for the chip this year. Like, I really do. Especially we're seeing LeBron's not getting no younger. He's not getting no younger.
Right.
And if the Warriors, if they already seem like they could implode, and then you're going to add a Boogie on top of that, that's like, could be a double implosion, possibly. Who knows? But, yeah.
I mean, losing Rondo, I think, was really the more underrated, but definitely just as, I think, almost as important as having LeBron. You talk about him as a stabilizing force in the second half of that Golden State game. I mean, a primetime game on Christmas where all eyes are watching, and, the Lakers look like they're on the brink of total implosion. Having him in there, that veteran presence to tell the guys, look, get in your spots. We're running these plays. Get to the spots that you need to be on the floor, and we'll be fine. And I feel like that's what he did for them. I've seen that influence that he's had, in the last couple stops he made in New Orleans, turned it up in the playoffs last year. I think the year before, managed to jump out to a 2-0 lead with the Bulls over the Celtics before he broke his hand, and then they ended up losing in 6. That's really the impact he's had. I had some reluctance, with him joining the squad. I think going back to last year, they were thinking about adding him, and it's good to see that he's having the sort of positive impact on the young players that he showed at his last 2 stops with the Pelicans and Bulls, and it's really tough to have him out right now in addition to LeBron.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, I don't know what's up with his hands because he was out like a month with his finger hurt, came back for the Warriors game, dominated, and then in that Warriors game got hurt and is out another month. And yeah, it was really strange.
It's another hand injury, yeah?
Yeah, another hand injury.
One of the pros and the cons with a guy like Rondo, who is a guard that loves to get in the face of opposing players and sticks his hands in there. That's sometimes the downside that you have. especially now that he's getting a little bit older, those hand and finger injuries looking like they're becoming more common.
Yeah, maybe it's also because his hands are so big or something. Like he's got like the longest fingers and hands. Maybe it's maybe that's a part of it.
I looked at a sports science clip on him yesterday. I mean, essentially his hands indicate that he should be like 7'5".
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that's crazy. All right, sticking to the whole Warriors thing, let's talk about this. Some footage came out. Well, LeBron released his footage of him talking about his GOAT status, saying that LeBron James himself saying that after beating the Warriors in 2016, coming back down 3-1, that he is the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Do you want to take this one first?
Woo. So I guess we frame this question about who's the GOAT in a lot of different ways. I guess if you're asking if his career would end today, is he the GOAT? I have some difficulty putting him past a Kobe or a Magic or a Jordan. I think he definitely has the resume to put him in that conversation, no question about it. And I even want to give him, more of a handicap from the standpoint that he's had to go against these Warrior teams that are really some of the all-time greats in terms of what they've managed to put together up there, and he just keeps running into them time and time again. Did manage to beat them in the finals, the only team that's done that. But I don't know if I could make him the undisputed GOAT if his career ends today. If I see him play through the end of this contract, a few more seasons where he has, similar sort of output and he can find a way to get back to a finals in what I think is easily the most difficult conference top to bottom that I've ever seen, then I think at that point you can cement him in that status.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that. That if he were to retire today, he would not be the GOAT in my book. But I do believe it is possible for him after his career is over to be the GOAT. And it's clear his strategy, it seems, almost is to play the longevity game because he's just not going to be 6-0 like Michael. But now if he becomes the first or second all-time leading scorer and has 10,000 assists, 10,000 rebounds, all that stuff. It's just going to be super impressive on the resume.
Yeah, and I think if he can get that ring with a third separate team, one in Miami, one in Cleveland, and hopefully one here. Winning a ring with 3 different franchises, I think that's going to be his landmarker in terms of, putting him up there with that Mount Rushmore players that you have on the short list for the GOAT.
Yeah, I mean, I think he definitely has to win at least one championship. And I actually applaud LeBron because of this challenge he put on himself. Coming to the Lakers, we all know you can't come here and not win a championship. And I'm not just saying that as a Laker fan, but I'm looking at basketball and I'm trying to take an objective look at the NBA and the history of the league. I mean, this is where we signed Wilt Chamberlain, we signed Abdul-Jabbar, we signed Shaq, and now we signed you, and all those 3 dudes won at least one chip with us. So I applaud him for taking on the challenge because, if you went to another team, I feel like it wouldn't be as much of a dude, you really need to get this chip. But on the Lakers, it just feels like the story wouldn't. Imagine if LeBron plays the rest of his career with the Lakers, it doesn't win another championship. It would be weird. I feel like I would feel kind of damn,
yeah,
you messed up or something.
Maybe not like Jordan with the Wizards weird.
Yeah, no.
My favorite version of Jordan. But
yeah,
Kobe guy and a Laker guy. But I'll give him the handicap from the standpoint that when you had Wilt, Kareem, and Shaq coming, I think you had more complete teams in terms of perennial playoff teams and kind of dark horse contenders.
Mm-hmm.
Wilt coming in with Baylor and West. I mean, two
definitely
future Hall of Famers. Kareem not really having the team around him at the point.
Yeah,
that he
no
got
Magic.
here. Magic and
no
Worthy came later on. And then Shaq in the mid-'90s with Van Exel, Eddie Jones, and young Kobe Bryant. This is certainly, I think, the most difficult task.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the supporting cast that he comes in with compared to some of those others that you mentioned. But, I mean, for a player who's been the face of the league for the better part of last decade, it would feel weird to see him end his career not at least making a finals appearance.
Yeah. And then especially if it always depends how the story goes down too. I mean, it's one thing if the Lakers never make a move and then LeBron just plays with these kids for the rest of his Laker career, like versus if Magic Johnson gets 2 All-Stars or a superstar and an All-Star around him. Like it definitely changes how you're going to view, his Lakers story. But my whole thing with LeBron is, can we just wait till after his career's over before we place him? Like that's just how I feel because he's not done. I mean, which is incredible, but he's not done. And I mean, you have a dude 6-0 in championships, and I mean, even with the Warriors thing is interesting to me because, all right, let's take the one he won. If you were actually to take like 3-on-3, the top 3 players in that series versus each other, like LeBron, Kyrie, and Love versus Steph, Clay, and Draymond, like you're gonna take LeBron and Kyrie's squad over that Warriors team any day of the week. Now, I know obviously basketball is a team sport and stuff, but I always think that's interesting. Like people almost like blend up this Durant thing into that championship. I feel like sometimes, like I mean, Durant wasn't on that team yet.
It's easier to forget that's the sequence of events that gets us to that point. The Thunder blowing that 3-1 lead,
mm-hmm.
the Warriors getting to that finals,
mm-hmm.
taking a 3-1 lead in that finals,
yeah.
and then finding a way through the antics of Draymond and some injuries and attrition with Golden State, along with some excellent play from LeBron and Kyrie to win that series. I mean, and if that doesn't happen, KD never signs, or probably doesn't sign with Golden State and create this absolute all-time juggernaut. Mm-hmm. So, just the very weird and unique set of circumstances that I think each step has to play out in order for that kind of perfect storm to come together and create that team. And who knows? Maybe LeBron's not out here if he manages to stay in Cleveland and they feel like they're still a contender head and shoulders above the rest of the teams in that conference.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, well, either way, it's interesting. I mean, even watching some broadcasters on these news channels, like all the old school people are like, oh, you shouldn't say that. Oh, if you're the best, let other people say it for you, blah, 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 which I kind of feel that way, but I do understand, like, whatever it is now, everyone's like, oh, the younger generation, that's what we do. Actually, Danny Ainge went as far as to call it like a Donald Trump type tactic, actually. That's what he was quoted saying that, I swear.
And that shows the sort of value that I put on some of the stuff that comes out of Danny Ainge's mouth, because he's had some far more cringeworthy comments than that. Again, LeBron has a legitimate conversation to say that he's in the ballpark.
Yeah.
He might be sitting in the bleachers and some of the other guys, the Kobe's, the Jordans, the Magics, are maybe in the premium seats, but he's in the ballpark. He is in the discussion, and I don't see anything blasphemous about him making the comments that he did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. Let's move on then. Let's move on to our next injury victim recently, and that is Mr. JaVale McGee, who I'm calling MVP from now on. Why is that? We went 2-5 without JaVale McGee. And I mean, we'll talk about Zubac right after this, but I mean, Zubac, he definitely came in and played well, did his thing offensively, but man, I really started to wonder, how valuable is McGee to this team? I mean, he's been beasting all year. What are you feeling about what you saw with the Lakers without JaVale and what he's brought to the Lakers?
I mean, from Shaq to the MVP, it's quite a journey there. No, I mean, look, the way this roster was constructed, they really didn't have a whole lot of depth at the 5 position. There was that talk going into the season about having LeBron or Kuzma play the 5, and it just, anybody who's played any sort of actual basketball, like on the court, realizes why that could never work. Even in this day and age, you still need a center that can serve as a rim protector and be that last line of defense. And JaVale has absolutely thrived in that role. I mean, virtually every game I see he has a block, he's getting rebounds, and he's doing what he needs to do in the pick and roll when he's catching those passes from LeBron or Rondo or Lonzo and finishing around the rim.
Yeah, it just seemed like JaVale just makes it so much easier. Like, just our record, just the way we were playing, like going 2-5 without him, it just, that right there said it all to me, like just how valuable he is.
And Zubac being in there, I mean, look, Zubac at this point, I feel like is doing the sort of things that I expect. On the offensive end of the floor, he looks very polished on that catch in terms of what he's doing, scoring the basketball. I mean, working off of the pick and rolls, diving to the basket, he does a great job doing that. Saw it in the Golden State game and a couple games, with the ones that JaVale missed. But on the defensive end, that's just the issue in terms of whether he can be there consistently. And I know that, he's managed to get a decent number of blocks, but he just doesn't have the sort of range and mobility that JaVale does in terms of protecting the rim. And that's why you see JaVale leading the center rotation for the Lakers. Yeah,
so Zubac, during a 3-game stretch, averaged 18 points, 8.5 rebounds, 2.5 blocks, and shot 78% from the field. That's just like in a 3-game in a row stretch. So now I want to ask you what you, like, if you're Luke Walton, you just saw Zubac put in some work, like now that McGee's back, how do you deal with this 3-center rotation? Now, do you want to keep Zubac in there a little bit? Does he just go straight to the 3rd string? Does he become your 2nd stringer? I mean, what do you think about
Yeah,
how
I mean,
works?
I think he's definitely earned some more playing time, right? And I think he's probably going to get it at the expense of Chandler. I think that's the player who, if you're looking at cutting into minutes with that rotation, you're looking at Tyson. JaVale, obviously, you're not really asking him to play a whole lot more than 25 minutes a night. So, about half the game. And then you're basically, I think, splitting the rest of that time, maybe 50-50 between Chandler and Zubac. Maybe if we're going 64, Zubac over Chandler. But, I still think that McGee is the starting center on that team for a reason. And you talk about the losses that they suffered when he was out. There's a direct correlation and causation, I feel like, between those two numbers.
All right, I want to move on to Mr. Lonzo Ball. There's 3 things from 3 different games I just want to quickly highlight. Against Charlotte, him and LeBron became the first 2 Lakers since Magic and Kareem in 1982 to have triple doubles in the same game. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, the Charlotte game.
Want to talk, and then in the Kings game, I thought this was interesting because he was playing really well that game, and then he, I guess, wants to be LeBron so bad that he cramped up at the end of the game.
Oh, don't put that on.
He got a cramp in the last 2 minutes of the game. I was like, man, that's interesting. Like, when does that ever happen? Like, I can't remember. And that was a game that, we lost on the game winner. And then the OKC game, which is a game before this one tonight, Lonzo got booed actually at the free throw line in the fourth quarter after missing like 4 straight free throws or something in a close game. And yeah, it's like, and it just, those 3 things just kind of show how up and down it is with him, and it's his second year and everything. But the thing, yeah, there's a lot to talk about with Lonzo, but why don't you just go ahead and tell me what you think about Lonzo this season and what you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I get back again to that play towards the end of this game, and it really just encapsulates in the problems that exist with this game right now. And that is that when he's asked to create his own shot, coming off of a screen when he's, going in the middle of the lane, he's at this point looking to pass, even when the defense has already schemed their way to a position where he has to take that shot. Mm-hmm. And he kind of, I see it, especially when he's close to the basket. And you and I talked about it earlier, his shooting form where he's kind of got that slingshot release. Mm-hmm. I know in the many appearances that LeVar has made, talked about when Lonzo and his siblings were younger, that was a shot he kind of developed to be able to shoot over some of the bigger teams and the older kids that they were playing on the AAU circuit. But he just, at this stage, doesn't have that in-between mid-range, that floater or runner. Doesn't really come to a jump stop. Does a lot of things that just get his motion and body in positions where he's putting up awkward shots, and he's got that, again, that slingshot release that even when he gets around the basket on the right side, he's trying to do that. I thought that the knee injury that he suffered with the meniscus over the summer that really kept him sidelined, robbed him of the opportunity to get a lot of that individual work done. Mm-hmm. And I think now that we've come to the point where he's played about a full 82 games, because he missed, I think he only played about 50 last year. You're seeing those same problems are still there, and I don't think it's something that's going to be solved now. It's going to take at least a couple off seasons with a skills and development coach to find some sort of way to iron out those wrinkles in his game right now, because I feel like they're just more and more apparent, and the more tape that teams have on him now, a full season's worth, they can really scheme their defense to put him in situations where he's not going to be able to help the team with the holes he has in his game right now. Mm-hmm.
Now, do you think the Lakers have time? Do they have 2 off seasons for him to get to where he needs to be?
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, the answer is probably not. Mm-hmm. It's the sort of balance that we've always kind of seen as a theme with this team, the win now versus developing for the future. Mm-hmm. And it's tough to know what this team looks like 2 months from now after the trade deadline, 6 months from now after the 2019 offseason is more or less concluded, and going into next year. And I'd have to guess that there are going to be some significant changes in terms of whether they're signing another max player or perhaps whether they're making a deal for one that includes one of their 4 blue chip prospects with Lonzo, Ingram, Kuzma, or Hart. But it's just tough to say right now, what his game's going to look like and what it looks like in the context of whatever hypothetical team that they have at some point in the future. But the fact remains that that's going to be the timeline in terms of getting Lonzo to the level where he's a complete point guard, and whether or not that fits in with what the Lakers are going to need for a championship contending team. Time will tell. We just don't know right now with what the personnel they currently have versus what the team could look like in the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that Lonzo and even Ingram are they're bigger projects than maybe Laker fans were hoping for. Just what I expected even coming in, especially Lonzo. But yeah, just a couple things on Lonzo. Something Stu Lance has been pointing out a bunch lately, just to bring up, is it's interesting how he's really good at finishing layups with his left hand, but can't do it with his right. You kind of touched on why. And the other thing, and this is what kills me actually about Lonzo, because I think I said this probably at my first podcast this season, that I was going to look at Lonzo's free throw percentage to determine, if he worked on his shot or just, improved. And I'm looking right now, dude, he's shooting the same free throw percentage this season as he was last year, and that's 45%, which is worse than Shaq. Shaq was at least 50%, I remember.
Yeah, I think 60, when the games really counted.
Yeah, and then 3-point percentage. I remember earlier when the season started, Lonzo was shooting 40%, and then it was 38, and now it's all the way back down to 31% 3-point percentage on the season. That's just. Even with whatever injury he had this summer, he could have been shooting free throws, right? Why can't he? Why didn't he improve in free throws? Why is he shooting? What did they say today? He's made 1 out of his last 10 free throws.
Yeah,
and he got booed in Staples Center. Come on.
Yeah, I with free throws, part of it I feel like a lot of the good foul shooters that I watch, they tend to have a lot of their lower body involved. Lonzo, if I'm looking at his shot from the foul line, tends to be a little upright, kind of rigid from that standpoint. And I think that's an adjustment that maybe he could look at making, but I feel like it just boils down to some degree those shot mechanics, and the fact that it is definitely going to make it a challenge for whatever coach he's working with, either during the season in practices or the off season, to find out what works in terms of having a consistent shot and a consistent foul shooting form. And it's the struggle right now to watch him and see what he's doing, that you don't necessarily know what the fixes are, because he's such an unorthodox prospect in terms of what his game looks like.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about the blue chip prospect of the Lakers that's actually kind of been breaking out and is starting to look sort of untouchable, if one would say, and that's Mr. Kyle Kuzma.
Kuz.
Now, since the last podcast, so this is over a 15-game stretch, he's averaged 20 points, 6 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 2 threes, 48% from the field, 83% from the free throw line, so he can hit a free throw. And he's been beasting. And the one thing that I really like what I'm seeing lately, and I remember it's something I brought up last year on the podcast, is I wanted to see Kuzma come in this year and develop some guard skills, because just how they kind of make Ingram a point guard and all this stuff. I feel like Kuzma had the same potential, and you're starting to see it. He's bringing the ball up a lot more. He's getting more assists, 3.5 assists now over the last 15 games. And you feel like his game, you feel like he's expanding his game. What have you seen from Kuzma?
Yeah, I think from last year to this year, you want to see the handle tighten up a little bit in terms of how he's managing his dribble. But he's definitely been I mean, even more effective last year. He looked, you know, coming into that draft as probably one of the most polished and pro-ready prospects, just in terms of the skill set he had and how it can really mesh with teams, because he works pretty well off the ball in terms of his ability to spot up and shoot the three. He makes great cuts towards the baseline and off the ball. And I think now that he's developing his abilities as a playmaker more, you're seeing him make more passes to set guys up for shots. It was kind of more the trend last year and the start of this year, where you'd see him when he was putting his head down to drive, he was driving to take a shot. Now I feel like it's more the case where he can kind of step back, read what the defense is doing, and then make that drive and have the wherewithal to make the pass if he needs to, while still balancing that with getting his own shot.
Yeah, definitely. I'm loving what he's bringing. He's shown that he can get 25 in a night, he can get 30, and just the array of shots he hits. Like, I just love all those floaters, and like he just hits all these cool, like, diverse shots. Like, is it really like you can score from anywhere? It almost feels like floaters. Like, it's really nice.
Yeah, he's definitely kind of a flip from Lonzo, where, and really kind of the more traditional route where you have with players that have a high degree of confidence and ability in their own game in terms of the one-on-one skills, you know, their spot ups, their ability to drive to the basket, get floaters, get runners, hook shots, all the sort of things that he has in his arsenal. And then the playmaking and ability to read the defense comes later. Lonzo's, you know, kind of the opposite, where he's always looking to pass first, almost to his detriment. And those other sort of skills, the ability to create his own shots in those situations, that's still coming along. But yeah, like I said, Kuzma just had a very pro-ready skill set, and I think you're seeing that flourish from year 1 to 2.
It's crazy though that he went 27th in that draft. Though it's kind of crazy to see, and looking back at that draft order and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like, when you draft well like we did, getting Kuzma and Hart, it just makes everyone more expendable. I mean, now having Kuzma, if you need to get rid of Ingram, it's not like, even though they're not the same player, but like they kind of have the same height and position. They guard the same person almost. It just allows you some freedom. So would you say, like, of our 4 blue chips, as you call them, would you agree? Because I feel like if I had to keep any of them, if I had to keep one today, I would pick Kyle Kuzma. Like, how do you feel? Like, if you had to just pick one to keep of the 4,
Yeah, I mean, Kuzma's definitely, I think at this point, established himself as the front runner. Now, the question that you ask yourself is, how high are the ceilings for Lonzo and Ingram? And it comes back to the fact that they're younger prospects, right? They were both one-and-dones, as opposed to Hart and Kuzma that spent multiple years in college. And it's not a surprise that they're a little more pro-ready now than their other 2 counterparts. And you talk about Kuzma slipping in that draft position, going all the way at 27. That just tends to be the case with guys who aren't leaving school after their first year.
Right.
Scouts just kind of feel like they're more known quantities in terms of what they can do. But that if you're looking at possibly making a move to part ways with one of those 4 right now, I think you're asking the question, how high is the ceiling for Lonzo and Ingram? And, can I live with watching them become players that maybe a few years down the line, when they're closer to Kuzma's age or Hart's age or older, do they turn out actually being better players with that sort of polish to their games later on? Yeah,
definitely. No, that's $1 million question. How good will Lonzo or Ingram be? Like when they're 25, 26, how good are they going to be? And
of course, you talk about that timeline too, that,
that's going to be when they're 25, 26, LeBron's contract is done.
Yeah, he's long gone at that point. And, do you have that sort of time? Is there, any sort of way to speed up that process? I mean, those are the sort of tough questions that Magic, Pelinka, and the rest of that front office are going to be grappling with over the next few months because, like you and I both said, it's starting to look more and more like they may need to make some sort of move. I was always of the opinion that you want to try and get the free agents to sign outright and not sacrifice any of your blue chip prospects. At this point, though, it's starting to seem like maybe that's not the case. Maybe they do have to make a move, then sacrifice one of those guys if they feel like they want to be able to compete while they still have the known quantity in LeBron.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, let's wrap up talking about this OKC game. There's a few more things I want to bring up. Well, Kyle Kuzma got hurt this game, and he didn't play tonight against the Knicks. And, I feel like if Kuzma was there tonight, we probably would have won that game against the Knicks.
I have to agree, yeah.
Yeah, they're saying it's something with Kuzma's back. They're listing him as day-to-day, so, we'll see if he plays this weekend. Something kind of funny happened in that OKC game. I showed you the clip earlier with... It looked like Svi Mikhailiuk just met LeBron James that night. It was kind of weird. Like LeBron came and sat on the bench next to Svi, and Svi's looked at him all nervously, and then extended his hand out, and LeBron just shook his hand all casually. And then after the game, Svi actually went on Twitter and tweeted something like, "Hey, LeBron James, it was really nice to meet you. I'm a big fan of your game." And I don't know, I can't tell if it's real or not, but I would laugh so hard if LeBron really just met this dude Svi formally a couple nights ago. What do you think it's... I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't know. What do you think?
I think I said it before. 80% of me thinks he did actually just meet him. It seems a little weird because, Svi... I think he's on I don't know if he's on a two-way deal, but he's definitely spent some time with South Bay.
Yeah.
I feel like at this point, he spent more time with the big club than he has with South Bay, and he was there all of training camp. 20% of me thinks that it's a ruse, that they're all in on it. It's probably the less likely scenario, but interesting little tidbit from that game.
Because it seemed kind of candid, the video clip. I don't know, but who knows? Also, we saw this game, which just cracked me up, which just goes back to me just thinking LeBron. Actually, I have a quote from some GM or some exec in the NBA calling LeBron a mob boss, and that he's just such a businessman. Seeing him in the back with Magic and Rob, watching the Lakers play, it looked like the Lakers were on a tryout or something. They were making big moves or something. Big decisions were happening with those three. That was kind of funny that happened in the OKC game because you never see that. When do you ever see a player in the middle of the game, even if they're injured, in the tunnel talking with the president and GM of the team?
Yeah,
it would only be LeBron. That's the only person.
Exactly. And I mean, it's look. It goes to what I feel like people understood, that this is what you get with LeBron. There are pros and cons to, I think, almost anything in life. And look, the pros, obviously, that you get an absolute, bona fide first ballot Hall of Famer, somebody who can affect the game in virtually every way, and makes your team exponentially better. But you also get LeBron and the crew, Maverick Carter, Rich Paul, and everything that comes with that. That was, I feel like, what kind of wore out the welcome in Miami with Pat Riley, who, really, that kind of wore on his nerves after a while, and I feel like that kind of accelerated the separation that took place there. And then look, you could argue that part of the reason that maybe the Lakers didn't find a way to get Paul George over the summer was the bad blood that came up with Julius Randle's contract situation and the way they had to ship out D'Angelo Russell. And part of that, came with KCP, also a Clutch Sports client, being on the roster, getting a lot of playing time last year. I think led the team in minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And, a lot of people were saying, yeah, he's out there scouting the team, the front office, everything about the operations and what moves in the building to see if this is a spot for LeBron to get to. And, yeah, you talk about it again, another shrewd and calculating business decision. But, at this stage, I think that you, as a Laker fan, I feel like most Laker fans, the vast majority of them, they're going to accept that in exchange for all the benefits that LeBron brings to a team.
Yeah, when the Lakers go 1-4 without him, and then people are going to appreciate LeBron a bunch more. But I have the quote here. It's from a Western Conference GM. It's about the LeBron-Anthony Davis thing, but the quote is, "I'm not worried about James tampering to the media about AD. It's that James and Paul, Rich Paul, are mafioso mob bosses of the NBA. That's the problem." I love that quote because I know it's so true. But yeah, okay, one of the last things I want to talk about was actually Paul George, and we saw them come into our building. He got booed, thank you, but it had me thinking, like, with how good Paul George is playing this year, like, where do you think the Lakers would be right now if we did sign both LeBron and Paul George?
Yeah, and I guess, it's assuming that we have to, maybe cut out some of the guys who were going to fill that spot. I think maybe KCP, because he's a Clutch client, gets a nice kind of sweet deal in exchange for what he got the prior season. But yeah, I think you essentially have the same roster, maybe minus Lance and Beasley, and
which is fine.
Yeah, I think everybody takes that deal 100 times out of 100. But I mean, they're in the top half of the conference and probably have a record closer to what Oklahoma does. You never can say the shoulda, couldas, or what ifs in terms of what the team would have looked like. But I'd have to guess that they would be a top 4 or 5 team in the West, and that's saying a lot. Given how cutthroat this conference is this year. The fact that Oklahoma also would be a lot worse. They would be a fringe playoff team, I think, if you took him off right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think there are a few games, the game against Orlando at home, the Kings game, where they lost on the Boban 3. I mean, these are some of the games that I feel like you have a greater margin of error, and a player like Paul George probably puts you over the hump, and I think they have at least a handful more wins at this stage.
Yeah. Well, screw him. He didn't come. So, all right. Last thing, I just want to give a shout to KCP because he's been playing better lately. Like, he started the season really rough. Since the last podcast, he's actually our third highest scorer. It's LeBron, Kuzma, then KCP, shooting 48% from the field over that time. Has had 3 games of at least 25 points. And tonight, even against the Knicks, I felt like he saved us in a lot of ways, just knocking down timely threes. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention him real quick because he's been playing well. If you want to say anything.
I think KCP benefits from consistency. His role is the same regardless of the moving parts around him, whether LeBron's there running the offense, whether it's Rondo, whether it's Lonzo. He's doing the same things. He's running through and around as many screens as he possibly can to try and get that open jumper. I mean, he's a catch-and-shoot guy. And that doesn't really change regardless of who's in or out of the lineup. So, that certainly is something that he benefits from, and it's probably speaks a lot to his success right now. His role really doesn't change.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's look at these next 5 games. You tell me if we can win any of these or how many we're going to win. So we're playing at Minnesota on Sunday, at Dallas Monday, versus Detroit home game Wednesday, at Utah Friday, at home against Cleveland Sunday. So Minnesota, Dallas, Detroit, Utah, Cleveland.
Yeah, and a lot of that's going to depend on what,
Yeah, when LeBron comes back.
When LeBron's
Kuzma.
back, when's Kuzma, possibly Rondo.
Yeah.
If the team's constructed as it is now.
Yeah, if the team is now, let's say. Well, add Kuzma. Add Kuzma, though.
If it's constructed as now, I feel it's very difficult for them to win the games besides the ones against Detroit and Cleveland. If they have Kuzma, I think I'm more confident giving them the Detroit and Cleveland games, and maybe they take one of the first back-to-back with Minnesota and Dallas.
Yeah.
The game at Utah, it is on the road,
it's at Utah, yeah.
I kind of have to chalk that one up as a loss. That at Denver and at Utah, those are generally very difficult.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I got you.
Just in general, those two places with the altitude, those tend to be very tough places to play, and some really physical teams that you're talking about there. So that's generally a home court advantage that is tough to overcome. And Utah has always been a difficult spot for the Lakers to be able to get the win, even when they are a championship caliber team, a finals contender. But yeah, I feel like the home games are the only ones I'd feel really confident about them being able to get right now. And I don't know, man. You see that Jordan Clarkson, Larry Nance revenge game Cleveland won.
Yeah, for real. Well, we got to win some games. We're in 8th place now, and we got the Queens right behind us, and some good teams behind it. Even Utah is not even in the playoffs, so Lakers gotta hold the ship steady, at least till LeBron and these dudes come back. So we'll see how it goes. All right, well, that wraps it up for this podcast. Thank you so much for joining, Chris, and it was a pleasure. And
yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, Laker Nation. Till next time, take care. Have a good one. Happy New Year's. Peace.